Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Welcome back to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. My name is Kyle. Sean, how is your week going?
It's been a good week. I'm glad you asked. I've been waiting to tell you a story.
This is exciting.
We've talked about the gym and how frustrated I've been in the past with my previous gym.
Right.
Well, I switched gyms last year, as many people know, and I love it. Everything about it is easier and better. There are a couple little things that, like it's
always
small or, whatever, but parking and navigating the space, it's easy. Mm-hmm. Well, this week I had my first disappointment, and even though it was just an individual, not necessarily their practice or their policy or best practice, it was just an uneducated individual who really doesn't understand service.
Right.
So I'm on a, a stair stepper. I've been doing those quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And the one I'm using had a out of order sign on it a week prior. So obviously it's been down. The sign's no longer there. So probably like many people, we assume it's safe to use again, right? So I jump on it. And I'm on it for a couple minutes doing my thing, and I'm slowly ramping up the speed or whatever you call it. I'm setting it like a number 3, and usually I get up to a 7 or an 8.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I'm like 2 minutes into it, and I'm getting a good stride, and all of a sudden, it goes from a 3 to a 5, 7, and it like fast, like now.
Whoa.
And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm like pushing the button to bring it down. I'm like, what the heck? And I'm looking around, making sure I'm not touching anything funny. So it seems fine. So I just kind of go back to it, right? I keep moving, keep stepping. And again, 3, 5, 7, 8, like just jumps up by itself. And I'm sure you can imagine, like our listeners can, I don't have the kind of control in my legs that most people do. So just going from a 3 to an 8 out of nowhere, not okay. So I bring it back down, manual control it down. I'm really kind of hesitant, but I'm in a groove. I don't want to stop.
Yeah.
And it does it again. So now I'm like, okay, this is not okay, not safe. Mm-hmm. So I stop the machine. I step off the machine, and then I just walk straight to the front desk, and I'm like, hey. And Kyle, I started with, I know this isn't your problem personally. In fact, actually, what I think I said was, I know you specifically may not care about this, but I gotta let you know. And the guy's like, okay. I'm like, that machine over there, and I explain, I'm like, the sign was there last week, but now it's not. And I'm thinking maybe it didn't get fixed, or it needs more fixing. Anyway, I explain what happened, and the guy's like, well, it's not like I went over there and moved the sign myself. And I'm like, yeah, I know, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just letting you know somebody like me is going to get hurt. And that's gonna fall on the gym. Well, the sign probably got moved over the weekend, and I don't work weekends. Okay, I think you're missing the point here, Chuck. Can you just put a sign on it? What? I don't know, that's a corporate thing. Do you have a piece of paper? I'll write the sign.
Right.
So finally, I think he realized that I wasn't I wasn't saying it was his problem, but it was just an awkward conversation. And I'm like,
oh man,
I don't think you understand the risk you're assuming for your owners here.
Well, anyway. And just decency to people that
right.
come to the
it's
gym,
just,
right?
yeah. Yeah, I was floored. But I also understand he's young. He's able-bodied, and he's probably looking at me like a Karen. Or I have no idea. But everything about it, I'm like, dude, I'm just saying, I don't think your machine is safe.
Is there a male name for Karen? Like,
well, Karen, a long time ago, was made famous by Dane Cook in a bit that he did, and the male version is Brian.
Okay.
So maybe Brian, do you remember any of that?
No, I didn't know that was the origination. I'm glad I do now, though.
Well, no, I'm not. I don't know if that's the origination, but 10 or 12 years ago, Dane Cook had it set talking about those friends you wish you didn't have. Or the friends you kind of have to be nice to, but never want to hang out with. So a completely different context. Right. But he named the female version Karen and the male version Brian. So although a different context, maybe we can go with that.
Yeah, it's kind of like when we named all people that ask about like our disabilities in a like patronizing way.
Deborah?
Yeah, Deborah.
Something like that.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. So that was my Monday. That's what kicked off my week in the gym.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I thought you'd want to know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. My pleasure. Let's jump into What Say You? All right, today's review is coming from Bikers Unite. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This individual gave us 5 stars and titled the review, "Terrific podcast, not to be missed." They went on to write, "Help me to connect to a pal with a disability. A reminder that we all have obstacles to overcome. Very motivational. Thanks for the frank discussions. Love this podcast. Sean and Kyle are hilarious and shine a positive light on tough subjects. I liked this one and I appreciate how this relates to something today's guest talks about. You never know who's going to read or even listen to your work and how it may benefit them. So I love that Bikers Unite was able to lean on our show in order to make a connection with a pal of theirs. Bikers Unite, we're glad you've been able to connect with your friend, and we appreciate you sharing via this review."
What this makes me think of is paying it forward. We all contribute to this community of rare disease and disability. And just like we contribute because we have had people influence us in life positively and motivate us, we want to pay that forward. And you know what? This person, Bikers Unite, is paying that forward by letting us know as well. So I think it's pretty awesome how we all motivate each other.
Yeah, it's crazy how just living life, whether it's, doing something intentional like a podcast or just sharing a story here and there over coffee, you never know how people are going to glean from an experience or a perspective that you had.
Absolutely.
Which is one of the things our guest talks about today. So this particular review is apropos the right word? It just relates so well. Do you think so, or are you sure? Because should I Google this real quick, or is it safe to keep going?
I'm not 100%, but
dang it! All right, well, speaking of, our guest today is an accomplished writer, and we enjoy connecting with somebody that brings a lot of experience and perspective to a space we aren't super familiar with. Their work inspires many, and they have a ton of fun tying in real-life concerns in fictional story form, allowing readers to imagine possibilities. Please enjoy our conversation with Ennis. I feel like I know Ennis, and I have never met them, but we're doing it today with you, our listener. We are so excited to introduce you to an author, an advocate, and just all-around amazing person. So, Ennis, Rook, Bashe, welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Yeah, I'm super psyched to be here.
We are psyched to have you. Thanks so much for carving out some time. We just barely know the surface or the media version of Ennis. We know you write books. We know there's some disability stories in your life. There's all kinds of just stuff that you advocate for. Can you give us maybe the basic Cliff Note version of who you are?
Hi, my name is Ennis Bashe. I'm a social work graduate student, romance novelist, advocate, cat dad, and poet. Oh, and I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Okay, you've got a lot going on in your life, and I feel like probably the cat or cats keep you the busiest.
Oh, yeah. His name is Peanut. He's sitting on a chair very close to me. I'm keeping a close eye on him because if he wakes up, he will try to eat my hair.
Oh, wow. Wow. Gotta love that.
Sounds like that has happened a few times before.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. There's so much in your, even in that brief description of you, there's so much to unpack. You're a disabled, non-binary poet and novelist. You've written a handful of novellas. You just released a full novel. Like, it seems like you've got a lot of great things going on in your life. Obviously, we do spend a lot of time in the disabilities world and encouraging people to live beyond their circumstances, whatever they may be. And we've had some other folks on the show with Ehlers-Danlos. So tell us, maybe, let's start there a little bit. How old were you when you started to deal with symptoms that tended to impact your day-to-day?
Well, when you're a kid, you think like whatever you go through is normal. It's like, yeah, everybody just randomly throws up sometimes. Everybody goes on an errand and then has to sit down afterwards and like gets in fights with their parents over wanting to take naps. So yeah, like I just kind of ignored it, focused on theater and dancing. And then when I was in college, I just kind of crashed, which is common time for stuff like that to kick in. Ended up in knee braces and ended up very confused, thought I had Lyme disease, ended up super high on anti-malarials for a couple months. Not a good time. I was very confused a lot.
The wrong kind of high.
Wrong kind of high.
Yeah, I feel like college, and even especially for me too, I feel like it's a time when you're like, oh yeah, I need to take care of myself now. It's getting to that point where I need to try to maximize my own health.
Yeah.
Did those struggles or your diagnosis of Ehlers-Danlos kind of propel you into writing, or has that always been a thing that you had an interest in?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed writing, but I would say having a lot of friends ditch me because I couldn't get drunk and party anymore, and I just was taking naps. I was like, F it, I'm bored, I'll write a book.
Yeah, hey, there you go. I feel like I've said that before. I write a book and I sit down and write a paragraph and then never get back to it. So I'm impressed. You've got a lot of writings out there. In fact, I read an interview you recently did with Authority magazine, and I especially appreciated the vivid picture you painted. So you found yourself maybe alone quite often. Could you share for our listeners? We know we have a lot of people, all ages, all walks of life, especially parents that see their kid going through that kind of loneliness, and they try so hard to do things about it, and it's difficult. But what is your message to people, young people especially, that are in a similar space right now?
Quick question. Yeah, honestly, just like a lot of able people suck. Like they see somebody who's not like them, and instead of showing empathy, they're just like, oh, I'm out, I'm gonna ditch you. And but the fact is, like, as you move into adulthood and like when you're working on yourself, like you don't want friends who don't have empathy. So if people ditch you, like for being disabled, like that's an assessment of them and who they are as a person and what they're emotionally capable of.
Yeah, so you can't like blame yourself, right? Like, because I feel
Yeah.
like that's what we tend to do, is see other people's reaction as a reflection on us, and that's on them, right?
Like it Sometimes it does really hurt my feelings when I think about it, and like I still miss a lot of my friends from college, but then I remember that like I'm better off without like shallow and intolerant people who don't understand disability issues like in my life.
Yeah.
Let's say, and I think both Kyle and I agree with that, right? We lose people along the way, and that's probably true for all walks of life. You grow apart, or somebody disagrees with the person you love, or how you love, or whatever. Like they don't understand your disability, so they're like, "I'm out of here." Whether it's on purpose or just happens to be that way, who knows? So let's say we're going to tackle that problem. How in the world, and Kyle, you can answer this too. How do we help people understand that turning your back on somebody just because you are uncomfortable or disagree maybe isn't the best course of action?
Well, obviously as a writer, like I've been exposed to a lot of really interesting information about how like stories create empathy, and like seeing things from a different perspective allows people to like think about things in new ways. So I hope that like maybe I can contribute to fixing that problem in some small way, and like encouraging my readers to think about like how they're treating like the disabled people in their lives and how maybe they can show more empathy.
Yeah, I agree. So, do you have a specific example? I don't want to bring up like terrible stuff from the past, but do you have a specific example of how you've been mistreated because of disability or sexual orientation, or any sort of discrimination?
Oh, one time I was at a party, I had my cane. There was somebody there who hadn't seen me in a while, and he just looks at my cane and goes like, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" And I'm just like, I was born, man.
Life
chill
happened.
out.
Speaking of that sentiment, in that same article or interview, the Authority magazine one, I saw read the conversation you had explaining about disability and, being born that way and disability isn't bad, and why not call it the disabled community and not the differently able community, that whole train of thought. So can you talk to us about that? That person, that friend, I would imagine that was a natural reaction, right? Because their expectation is everybody is like them. They should all be healthy and walking freely without a cane. So if that's a somewhat natural reaction, and given that whole philosophy of disability isn't bad, how do you think or talk through that with somebody?
Oh, that's a good question, but that's also like a really big question.
It's kind of broad.
Yeah. Oh my God. I had like an interview through my day job with this great activist. I think Emily Ladau. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but she's the author of Demystifying Disability. And like she mentioned in this interview that we had that like sharing your personal story with somebody can often be a great way to create change. Like, so I just try and like share the truth with people. Like, hey, wheelchair bound is a weird word to use because people are totally capable of like getting in and out of their wheelchairs.
Yeah, and ultimately, it's all just words. But those words mean something, right? Like it matters what you call things.
Yeah.
What do you think about the whole person first language, like person with a disability versus disabled person or stuff like that? Does that kind of fall in this realm?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I don't think like it's like with any marginalized group, like people shouldn't decide what to call other people. They should say like, "Hey, what do you want to be called?"
Is that a good way to start a conversation? Hey, what do you want to be called?
Yeah, I think so.
What about seeing or meeting somebody visibly disabled? Whether it is a cane or wheelchair, you can tell they gotta carry some sort of device, maybe to help them breathe or something of that nature. Some people automatically, like the person you referenced earlier, they just jump in with, oh my gosh, what's wrong? I've had people say, are you okay? Or are you drunk? Or what in the world happened? And I've had some people just say, hey, I just want to make sure you're good. Are you okay? Let's say we had a moment to talk to all the non-disabled people, everybody that's able-bodied. We had a moment to give them some advice. How would you guys encourage them to think about that when they meet somebody or see somebody with a visible disability?
Yeah, so like I guess this is really simple, but just like don't be weird.
Yes.
That's good.
Like, if you would like you wouldn't go up to a redheaded person and say like, "Hey, is it true that gingers have no souls?" So just like don't ask weird, overly personal questions to a complete stranger. Like respect boundaries. Don't be weird. It really is that easy.
I've had the question before. You want to be educated. Can you give us an insight? How can I talk to a person with a disability? I'm like, wait, just like everybody else. Like you said, don't be weird. Just talk to them like you would talk to anyone else, right?
That's
just like be normal, please.
Nothing changes when you meet somebody that is 2 inches shorter than you or with red hair. You know what? Why do things change when you see a limp or a cane or a wheelchair?
Yeah.
Why is it all of a sudden, ooh, what's wrong with you?
It's like, you have, like, presumably people have basic manners that they've learned about how to talk to other human beings. Like, they don't need to forget all those manners just because they see a mobility aid.
What I'm taking away from this conversation right now is I'm going to approach everybody the way I'm sometimes approached. So when I go in and meet a stranger, I'm be like, why are you thin? Or why are you larger? Why are you 5'10"? I'm going to have those questions of, why do you wear your shirt like that? What happened to you?
Yeah.
I watched Ted Lasso, and there's this quote he has that he said he saw. It was from Walt Whitman, and it says, be curious, not judgmental. And I think that really applies to this situation. Like, you see something that you don't understand, and it should make you curious and not judgmental, right?
Yeah.
So, Ennis, I want to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
I have not read any of your work, but I can tell by reading the descriptions about you and so much of what you're writing. What would you say in 100 words or less or whatever it might be? Why do you write what you write?
Honestly, like, I could go into like some sort of thing about like, representation and showing better possibilities for the world and blah, blah, blah. But like, really, it's just fun.
Yeah.
How has your work or your writings helped maybe transform lives or give people different perspectives? Have you got feedback?
Surprisingly, yeah. Like, I've had some people say really nice things. Like, Many years ago, I had somebody message me saying that, like, after reading one of my books, which had a character who left an abusive relationship, like, they decided to leave their abusive relationship. I had somebody say that, like, they started crying on public transportation while reading one of my books because they've never read a character with ADHD before. Definitely a whole bunch of, like, this helped me get through the pandemic messages.
So tell us about your book that just came out. What's it about? And maybe tell us about some of the characters in the book and how they tell the story.
Yeah, so my book that came out in August is called A Scheme of Sorcery. It's about two young women in a fantasy setting. One of them is a knight in training, and the other one is a noblewoman. And they both work at the palace, and they absolutely hate each other. But then, like, the queen ends up under a mysterious curse, and they have to work together to save her. And of course, at first, they're like, oh, this is the absolute worst thing that's ever happened to us. I really hate this person. We're so different. But then they fall in love. It's called A Scheme of Sorcery, and it's available, wherever books are sold. It's available from Nine Star Press, which is my publisher for that project.
So why do you feel there's a need for more voices from the disability community in writing, more writers that write about that subject?
Well, overwhelmingly, like, if you look at the books with disabled characters that get, like, the biggest industry push, a lot of it really is from, like, abled writers, like from people who have a disabled child, or like from people who, think that disability is a sad problem for their characters to overcome. I do sensitivity reading, and, like, honestly, I would say sometimes the lack of knowledge that writers put into their work, I have seen some really shocking things.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, if there is ever a disabled person, it's to make the point that disability is, like, sad or bad or something, right? And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And if that's all we're seeing, like, that's obviously how we're going to perceive it.
Yeah, and, like, I just think the answer to inaccurate stories, like, is just, like, more accurate stories out there and more knowledge available to readers.
Yeah.
The impetus behind my series with disabled characters, I'm currently working on the second book in it. The first book is called Rescued by the Married Monster Hunters. And The Witcher, right? Do you guys know The Witcher?
Don't.
Oh man, you guys are like my parents' age. So there's, like, this character in The Witcher. She has, like, scoliosis or something, and everybody's like, oh, she's so ugly, poor her. And then she's like, I'm gonna give away my ability to make babies and trade it for a cure for my scoliosis. And then after that, everybody is like, oh my God, she's so beautiful. She's the hottest chick in the planet. She's a main character. And I was just like, okay, why does she have to get cured to be a hot chick? So I just decided to write a book about, like, disabled, like, people who fight monsters and use magic and, like, have these badass adventures in a fantasy world without needing to, like, get cured or anything.
That's powerful, especially when you think about in real life. How many of us are going to live our lifespan without a cure? And that doesn't necessarily mean we can't be badasses.
I get so concerned when I see a disabled character in the media because I'm like, oh man, like, I like this character so much. I bet they'll either end up dead, cured, evil, or, like, all of the above somehow. And, I try and stay away from that in my work because, like, there's too much of that and people just hate it.
Yeah, and specifically the cure thing, I feel like disabled people are expected to hate their disability.
Yeah.
And so they want to find a cure. And okay, a cure is fine, but in the process of that, if you're depicting the disability as the most terrible thing that needs to be eliminated, like my disability is part of who I am. So if I need to find a cure, like, do I need to hate part of myself? Maybe those two things can live together without being hatred in there.
Yeah, totally. Like everybody deserves to live their best life, but also, like everybody deserves to be happy and have a good life just as they are.
Right. I like
Love
it.
that. And yes, I'm grateful that you've carved out time. You let Kyle and I be curious kids at some degree and ask all kinds of questions. I am moved by your commitment and your dedication to your work and representation and just being yourself. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you, connect with you, follow you, maybe find your writings and so on?
Yeah, so my website is ennisrookbash.com, and I'm Rook the Bird on Twitter. And I have a newsletter, and you can find that through my website and through my Twitter account. And you should definitely sign up for information about my upcoming projects and new releases.
Thank you again for being on the show today and sharing a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Hey Kyle, I've got a question for you after that conversation.
Yes, please.
Do you feel old?
Oh, yes, more and more every day, man.
More and more. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel when I'm at work, right? All kinds of little comments or references to maybe TV shows or games that were popular when we were kids, and somebody today might be like, what? Never heard of that.
No, well, I was just thinking, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about how TV used to be like whatever's on. You just watch that. And that's totally not how it is. You sit down with an intention to watch a specific thing. You watch that for a couple hours, and then, yeah.
That's it. Yep. Good point. Ennis, thank you for joining us today. Kyle, it's time to wrap this up with our thank you notes. So who are you saying thank you to today?
I'm saying thank you to the State Department of Vocational Rehabilitation. And
whoa.
Yeah,
okay?
man.
You're saying thank you to a government? Are you okay? You good?
Yeah, no, and because it worked well for me.
Nice.
That's why. And I know that's a good point. Recognizing that there are many situations where the government does not work well for folks. But in this case, it worked well. So the State Department of Rehabilitation, their goal is to either find or help people maintain employment. And so part of maintaining employment is having a living situation that works and transportation and all that. So I am having them help with a new house project. I am having them put in a roll-in shower, and we're doing a couple things to the kitchen for accessibility.
Nice.
So I'm just grateful to have that resource to depend on.
For sure.
And provide opinions and resources to get this done. So
nice.
Thank you to the state.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. I'm saying thank you to somebody that helps book travel for me, not because I'm anybody important and cool, but because of clinical trials. So a big thank you to Don Sievers, somebody I've never met, but have emailed over the last couple of years. And whenever it's time to make a visit to a clinical site, she's the person that helps arrange the hotel and the flight. And she's always an incredibly gracious and kind individual. And I just get the impression that she loves helping other people. So, Don, thank you for all your help over the years.
I like that one because when you're a participant in a clinical trial, you're volunteering out of your own goodwill and your own contribution to seeing this drug go forward. How nice is it to just have a few things taken care of, like your flight and your hotel? Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it definitely makes it easier to manage and not as stressful. And, you don't have to carve out a lot of time to figure out what flight will work and layovers. And you just kind of give them a few parameters and they just make it work.
Yep.
So very, very helpful. Thank you, Don, and thank you to the State Department of Vocational Rehab of Pennsylvania. As always, Kyle and I believe in the power of expressing gratitude, and we'd encourage you to find an outlet to do so yourself. Alright, that does it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Easy links to some work by Ennis, Rook, Bashe can be found in our show notes. If you're loving the show, continue sharing and liking. Those things really do go a long ways for Kyle and I. We look forward to talking to you again next week. Until then, keep living with urgency.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to donate.
Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app.
I got really into LARP when I was in college, and I find that the community there, I've met a lot of really great, inclusive people.
What is LARP?
Oh, live action role playing.
Okay.
Think like D&D, but instead of rolling dice, you're like running around with swords, fake swords, obviously.
What is D&D? We're old, and you talk when somebody says something about video games, I literally think about a Game Boy. Like,
I had one of those. I had a Game Boy when I was a kid.
No, you didn't.
Yeah,
That's
had the. Actually, no, you're right. I had the DS.
Okay.